listening to the AfterWord.
From the loft.
I don't know.
It gets you every time.
I know.
And it never gets old. It's always fresh and inviting. Keeps our listener coming back.
The purpose of this podcast
he just
is
ignored me.
to process together a little bit more of the text that was just preached. And I should also say, like, this is like live processing. Some of these thoughts are half thoughts, some of mine anyway. And this is not us saying necessarily this is the stance of the church with everything that we talk about. We are processing this together. The passage was just preached. We want to see God's goodness in it. I am joined by Vince and Kirsten. Betty's back. Yep. And then my wife, Cassie, is also on.
Hello.
Yeah, given some of the content here, I thought it might be helpful to have a couple of couples. Before we get going, though, Betty, I want to ask you, can you give us a little update on your trip, why you were there, maybe a takeaway, what anything you'd like to share with our listener?
Yeah. I was in Japan.
How was the sushi? Let's just go straight to where we're
It was
headed.
so good.
Yeah.
I only had it once, though.
No,
we did like the
John.
conveyor belt sushi, and I
Yeah.
ate like 12 plates of it.
At the grocery store? Did you go to that one?
No.
Okay, keep going.
Anyway, I was in
Conveyor
Japan.
belt sushi?
Oh,
yeah, where you just like order
it
on
and
an
it's fine.
iPad and just like comes like on a
really?
belt.
Oh, it's so good.
So good.
Okay.
It was dangerous. And it was like cheap.
Yeah,
anyway.
real cheap.
That's my takeaway. Cheap sushi. I was in Japan on a vision trip, actually, to just kind of feel out whether Japan could be a good fit in the future for ministry and life. And I got to meet so many people. John, if you're listening, this was like the busiest and most tiring week of my entire life. So I don't know, thank you or not thank you. But yeah, it was really great to just meet a lot of people, go to a few Japanese churches and just kind of see what ministry has looked like there. I think a big takeaway for me that I want to keep it like general too is just how desperately Japan needs the gospel. And I think just good reminders for me of how to pray well for the country, for the people who are there. It is a really, really hard field, and work there is slow, and often you don't see much fruit. And the church there is dying too. Like literally, like most of the church is like pretty old. And so there's just such a need for people to come into labor and to help build relationships with Japanese, to share the gospel with them and see more come to Christ. So I think that was like a takeaway. And I share that too as a way to encourage all of you to pray for Japan, because the harvest is very, very plentiful there, and millions of people go without like meeting a Christian or hearing the gospel. So that was really impactful for me.
Good use of time.
Yes.
Yeah. Welcome back, Betty.
Thank you.
Here is our intro question, which is appropriate given this passage. What is an awkward moment from your life that you would like to share?
Other than this moment
right now,
we're about to say.
next 45 minutes. Yeah.
Other than yesterday.
Well, I have one that I remember. I have a lot of awkward moments, but I can only share one. I remember it was...
It's never stopped you before.
That's true. Okay. This is going to be the podcast today, is me sharing all my awkward moments. No, there's one that stands out as my most awkward moment. I remember it was December of 1997. And I remember that because I had just finished my first semester of seminary, and I had not done any Christmas shopping, which is not my norm. I was feeling very far behind. And it was the last Friday before Christmas, and I went to the mall, and I went to Bath and Body Works. Lots of details here, guys. And I wasn't paying attention, and I was speed walking, and I was walking out.
You were speed out?
I was she was trying to get to the next place.
I was trying to get to the next place.
She wasn't like jazzercising.
Not jazz, but I was like walking. Like I was on.
Yeah,
I was on mission.
Moving.
I was walking fast because there wasn't much time left. Like the mall was closing or something. And I was looking to my side to see if they had what I needed, and they didn't. And I was walking out, and I missed the door completely and walked into a giant plate glass window. So hard that I left a giant grease smudge from my head. And then I had a bruise in the middle of my forehead for the next 2 weeks. It was awkward.
Did you look around quick to see if anybody was watching?
Everybody stopped because it was so loud. Like it rang in the store. And so that was a really awkward moment. I just stood there. I was like, okay. And then I just walked out the store.
See you later. That's good.
Yep.
Who else? Awkward moment.
You got one, Eric?
I do have one, and I'm I'm going to try to leave the establishment unnamed. So this is years and years ago. I had moved to Fort Collins. Only been here about maybe a year or two, and somebody wanted to meet at a local cafe, we'll say. I'd never been to this place before, and so I went, and they have a big counter, and all of their food and drinks are up there. And so I'm looking through, like, well, what might I want to get? And I asked the person behind the counter who worked for this establishment, I was like, hey, like, is your tea or whatever good? And he kind of gives me a sideways glance. He goes, yeah, we make it in-house. Like, okay, all right, that's good. So I go back over and I'm ready to order. And remember, this was like 10 years ago, and those screens, they can flip around to you so you can do a tip or sign or whatever. They were still relatively new. And so I walk up and the screen's still facing me from the person previous to me. And so the screen actually has all the options of stuff that you can order. Like, oh, maybe you just like start ordering yourself off the screen. It's a little bit new. And so
you were before your time.
Yeah.
That was before you ordered on a screen. Okay.
Yeah, I'm known for being kind of ahead of my time. And so I'm trying to think, like, do I want this or this? But then the person behind the counter comes back to me and looks at me like side eye and slowly turns the screen back around to him and makes me feel like a complete idiot. So I have never been back to the establishment, and I tell everybody not to go. And I'm so tempted just to name it right now, but I'm not going to do it.
Will you tell us afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Will tell you afterwards. But the awkward moment was less a public thing, but between me and the worker. Felt like a moron.
Have you ever seen that person again?
No.
Just like in the grocery store, like, oh. I don't know if I have any. I'm sure I have awkward moments. But I think this is to my shame. I think I often make awkward moments about me quickly about other people and try to throw them under the bus as quickly as I can.
That's what I should have done.
Yeah.
I'm like, why do you have that pointing me?
No, that's not. That's to my shame. I heard a comedian once say his intention in all of life was to help people never have a moment where they had deja vu. So he would just try to make every moment that he could be in as bizarre as possible so that no one would ever think, I think I've experienced this before.
No, you haven't.
No, you haven't. I can't think of any. Can you help me, Kirsten? I don't know of any.
I mean, there have been times like you've gone in for a hug and people were not open or willing to hug. And so they kind of stood there with their arms straight. And so there's those types of things that you've experienced.
Yeah. I don't know. If you have an awkward moment with me, once you call in now, the lines are open.
Betty, Cassie, anything come to mind?
I have plenty of embarrassing moments. In fact, the hug comment made me think of a fairly recent awkward hug moment. But you said awkward, so I'm going with a little bit more awkward than just embarrassing. My family wasn't super open talking about life and changes and this topic that is before us today. So I remember one time, I was probably around 13, sitting in the living room, Dad's in his recliner, I'm on the couch, and Mom just hands me this pamphlet about my changing body. And so I sat there. I was like, this is ridiculous. I knew this is like, we should be talking about these things. So I just sat there in front of them and read it with them both sitting there in the living room doing
out
their
loud.
thing.
Did you read it out loud?
No, I wish I had. But I mean, it stands out to me. I was like, this is awkward, and I'm going to keep it awkward for them too right now and just sit here and read it in front of them. Maybe they didn't even bat an eye at thinking it was awkward, but to me, it was really awkward.
My parents just took me to look at a book at the mall.
We're not going to buy it.
We didn't. We stood in the mall and looked at the book.
Pay close attention.
And then we went and looked,
Kirsten.
bummed around at the other stores. That was it.
Bath and Body Works, in fact.
You win.
They go home like, job well done. Yep.
High five.
Success.
Yeah, that's done.
Talk achieved.
Talk achieved.
I have many awkward moments. I feel like most times that I interact with people, I walk away like, that was pretty awkward. But
but mostly because of them, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
never because of me,
Right.
even though I'm
Understood.
the common denominator. But one time on campus, when I was in school, I had to go to the bathroom really bad before class, and there wasn't a lot of time, so I went in like on a mission. And I opened up like the door, went inside, and then I saw a stall that I'm pretty sure like was unoccupied, and I shoved it with like all of my strength, and there was a girl in there, and we just like stared at each other for a few seconds, and then I finally left. But I was just, that's the only thing that comes to mind, because I feel like it was like a deer in the headlights moment for both of us. But it wasn't locked, so of course I went in full strength and shouldn't have in that moment.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of another one for me, but I won't share it. That was gonna be really awkward. So talking about awkward, Vince, shall we do a summary of this passage?
Yeah.
Did Vince ever come up with one?
I don't. I mean, I'm sure there are many, but unfortunately, I am too quick. I'm quick with my words and slow with my kindness, and I usually just turn it toward other people. I should think about it. But also awkward situations don't really bother me. I just go with it and try to make it even more awkward. There's some Sunday mornings where it's really awkward. Get up after announcements or something, I'm like, okay, here we go. So, but all right, we'll move on. 1 Corinthians 7. I decided middle of the week last week to change where we were headed. So we were initially supposed to go through verse 16, and after studying through verse 16 last week, I realized there was probably a lot that we could cover in the first 9 verses that would be helpful for us to just spend some time there. And then starting verse 10 all the way through some later verses, it talks more about marriage, divorce, remarriage, and how all that works out. So that's coming in the weeks to come. So for this week, actually, let me say this too. These things that we're talking about in chapter 7 are these are meaningful conversations, and probably conversations or topics that may be hard for a lot of people to take in. So I don't want to breeze by them, and I don't want to assume that as we talk through it, it's as easy as what we talk through. So we'll probably say some things even today that will feel like simple conclusions or simple answers. And I just want to say very clearly, none of this is super simple. Especially in the coming few weeks when we start talking about marriage and divorce and remarriage and all of that. These topics are not simple to get through. So I want to acknowledge that there are probably some who are listening who struggle a lot with these things. And we have a God who's gracious, and I think we have a church who's gracious as well. And so we can walk through these things together. So that being said, chapter 7, verses 1 through 9, Paul talks about the big picture is how do we, because he's coming off of a chapter talking about sexual immorality, the big picture is how do we help guard one another from sexual immorality? And one of the ways to do that is within the framework of marriage, and that is what Paul gets at in this, that there are relations for a husband and a wife that they're to have together that will help guard them from impurity, immorality, help guard them from the temptation to sin. And so this is written to the church, and Paul gives several commands throughout that your bodies are not your own, you're not to deprive one another. This is all for guarding the other from temptation. And then at the very end, verses 8 and 9, he gets into those who are unmarried and how that plays out, and the commands there. So I'll leave it at that. Go, Eric, with your questions.
Oh, yeah,
your
here we
lists
go.
of questions. Hey, by the way, we have 5 people in the loft, so it's kind of tight. We're all sort of sitting. Eric's
Awkwardly. This is what's awkward.
Yeah, this is what's awkward, crammed in this little space.
Yeah, and as we do this podcast, we're going to try to keep things pretty generic and talk about the ideas and the topics, and less probably some personal application with this particular one. Although that is important. I was talking to somebody on Sunday morning, and she's got some kids, and her perspective was really thankful that the church addresses these things head on, because all of our kids are going to hear it, and we all have heard it probably at various places, but where else better to talk about it than the home and with the support of the church and from a gospel perspective. And so we don't want to shy away from any of this. But I think that's probably my first question. Why does the church not talk about this?
I mean, I think a big piece of it is that the culture is so overly sexualized that we often are reactive rather than taking time to actually be responsive. And so because things are so open and inappropriate in our culture, I think at times there's this push to look different than the culture. And so we kind of shut it down and don't really know. And it is an awkward thing to talk about. It is something that feels it is very personal. It is very private. It is something that you don't want to necessarily air to a large group. And yet at the same time, I think it's something that probably we've shut down too much in the church as far as conversations and things along those lines.
I think that's ironic, because that's kind of what it sounds like the Corinthians maybe were doing as well. Their question was, is it good for man not to have relations with a woman at all? It sounds like they were probably, the culture in Corinth was very promiscuous. The Temple of Athena was there, where there were like 1,000 temple prostitutes. And so they took the opposite extreme, right? Like, we're so holy. We're going to go to the other extreme and not even have relations outside of the need to procreate. So even within marriage, it sounded like that may have been the debate within the church or the stance within the church. And so we've, in our modern day culture, done the same, essentially, where we're not even going to talk about it because we're too holy to talk about it, obviously,
I think there's also this shift that, I grew up as like a kid in the purity culture of the 80s and 90s. And there was kind of this message of sex before marriage is dirty, it's bad, it's horrible, it needs to be avoided, don't think about it, don't talk about it. And then all of a sudden, once you're married, you're like, okay, now it's go time. But when that is the message that is kind of communicated, that it's a bad and dirty thing, and then once you're married, all of a sudden you have to shift your brain into thinking, oh, wait, no, this is good and beautiful and how God created it. And I think there's a lot of damage there that's done in that when it's being approached as like this evil, wicked thing, and then all of a sudden now there's permission. I think there was a lot of damage done. And so it created this kind of taboo culture of we can't talk about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and yet Paul's point here is that it's normal and it's good, and in fact should be regular, so that at least the husband and wife, as a guard against sexual immorality, I guess is probably the best way to put it, as Paul puts it here in verse 2. And I had a question with that. Which is fascinating to me, because if regular sexual relations between a husband and wife is part of God's plan for guarding a husband and wife from sexual immorality, then it sure seems like it should be something that we highly encourage within the church. If it is like even a central part of God's plan to help his children, rather than something dirty, like you said, Kirsten. Vince, I want to ask you something about this, because before we started recording, you had mentioned something from your study about the God-given part of both marriage and singleness, which I think ties into here. Could you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, it's verse 7 where Paul says, I wish that all were as I myself am. And then the next part, but each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. And the word there, gift, is the same word that Paul uses throughout 1 Corinthians, mostly in talking about the spiritual gifts that have been given. And so there is a thought that marriage, it's not just a gift like a present on Christmas, but marriage has been given to a husband and a wife as a gift from God, much like the gift of teaching, or much like the gift of encouragement, or something like that. That is a thought that gift has been given to the couple. At the same time, as Paul's point here is that it's a gift that is given to those who are single to be single. So anyway, I don't know how far down that road I'm comfortable traveling to say, yeah, that's what Paul's saying. That's exactly what he's saying, that that's a gift that's given to us by God, because to be married when you maybe have been given the gift of single, is that sinning against God? Is that quenching the Spirit? What is that? So I probably don't lean in the direction of saying this is a gift like the gift of teaching, given to a person that it must be used in a particular way. But there is something unique about it, that there is a gifting or a God-given ability or discipline to be married or not be married, and what comes with that. In the case of the single person, he says to exercise self-control, and that has to come from the power of God working in the person, a gift from God in that person to exercise self-control. He says in verse 9 that if you cannot, then you should be married. So there is some special or unique way in which God has gifted some to be married and some to be single.
I get a sense from this that Paul's view, and correct me here, because this is just a sense I get, that singleness is actually the preferred route to go, whereas marriage is a concession of sorts. Yeah,
which we can't say. I see that too. I think it's preferred from Paul. That's why I said on Sunday that this was Paul's preference, and we'll see it later in the coming chapters where he talks about how there are certain, and it's tricky how to say this. There are certain burdens that come along with marriage that those who are not married do not have. Now, that's not to say that those who are single have a walk in the park and they don't have some other relational things that are challenging as well. But for the married person to pursue ministry opportunities with the same kind of vigor is limited, because you have your first priority, your first ministry is your home and your family. And so that's Paul's preference, where he's saying, I wish that you all would be like me in this place of being able to have devotion to God alone in ministry. So it comes across that way. I don't think we can say that that marriage is less than, because marriage came from the very beginning, or at least the idea of it, when God said it's not good that man should be alone. So I think Paul's case is actually the exception, and for him personally, the concession is to be married.
I think too, you have to consider that, God set up the entire picture of Christ and his bride based off of marriage. And so the entire New Testament and redemption that we see coming is based on a picture of marriage. And so, I think we can get in trouble when we start talking about which one is better, greater than, or less than, rather than just saying different gifts. You can't compare gifts, and so I think that it's what God chooses for each of us.
One thing I appreciate about this passage and some that we're coming to, Paul's generally pretty clear to differentiate when it's his perspective versus what God is saying. I in my Bible circled every time he said anything along the lines of, it is my belief, or I say, or the opposite when he says, God says, this is not me, it is the Lord. So I do appreciate, and I think that applies here. He's very clear that it's his perspective according to his personal experience. This is the better way to be, but probably coming off the fact that that's what he was called to be.
Right.
Do you all feel like the church does a good job of emphasizing the fact that singleness is a gift? Because I think I struggle with that and seeing that in the church.
I think that's a pretty common experience of singles, because I think a lot of singles that I've known have kind of felt like they're viewed as less than, or it's just not as honorable to be single as it is to be married. And so I don't know how much of it is that the church does a poor job of it, or the baggage that each side brings in. I don't know, but I do know that has been an experience of many people, that they feel like, and maybe it's because there's so many ministries that are geared towards children and families and stuff like that. And so the assumption then is singles are not as valued. So I think there's probably room that the church can grow. And then there's also probably, maybe an over awareness of feeling singled out that's not always there for the single.
Singled out.
Yeah, do you see what I did there?
Yeah, I like that. That's good. I think that's probably the case for any exception. So for anyone who is an exception, it probably does feel like, and I don't mean exception as bad or less than. I just mean a minority. It probably stands out more as like I'm not sure if this is a place where I feel cared for by the church. And I think the church ought to hear that, ought to listen to that and say, yep, that's good. We need to hear it. So let's try to figure out how to bring that back to the center. But that's probably the case in a lot of ways.
What do you think, Betty?
How the turntables have.
I think it depends. Like, I think, what was I going to say? I don't know if it's, for me, I don't know. Other people might have different perspectives too. It almost doesn't feel like it's as much like explicit. I think kind of like, I don't remember which one of you said this now. Like kind of like maybe implied through like the things that churches offer, or even like what is said on like a Sunday through a sermon, that a lot of like applications sometimes feel more geared toward family. But I do appreciate that, Vince, that you do bring in like, what is it like to be single or student or things like in different applications in different seasons. But I think that's been, I don't know, like over the years, it's maybe less explicit that it feels like that, but there are maybe some more implicit ways that it feels harder to recognize singleness as a gift. And it probably depends too on like what it is that you're wanting in life, where it maybe feels more that way. Kind of, you were saying, Kirsten, like the baggage that maybe comes with it. So I'm sure I would have a very different answer than others, because there are other ways that I see like how the church does share how it is a gift. So I don't know if I really answered that question. I'm not super, my brain is a little
jet
bit
lagged.
Yeah. I think that's helpful to think about. And to Paul's point in verse 8, he says to the unmarried, or we could say single, to the unmarried and the widows, which is maybe another category of people who feel left out. And there are probably many, many other categories, but I think Paul does a good job of bringing in like, these are other categories. I'm writing to those who are married, but here are some other categories that come up. So I think it's something to be mindful of. I appreciate you asking the question.
Yeah, I think I've personally struggled with it more in like campus ministry than in the church, like as a whole. So context also changed things too.
Yeah, I wonder if that's because in a campus ministry, it's all the same kind of people, the same aged people, and it stands out differently. Whereas if you're in a church and you have someone who's 70 and 13 and all the different ages and everybody in different life stages and all that, it doesn't stand out as stark. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks for bringing that up.
I want to ask one more question on singleness before we head back into really the main idea of chapter 7 here. If you're single and you don't want to be, what are some ways forward to embrace that season of not wanting to be what you currently are? And maybe trying to explore too, like, has God given me this gift of singleness that I don't particularly want right now? Any thoughts there about how to embrace singleness if you don't particularly want to be single?
I'm going to say something somewhat related, but not answer your question. Sorry.
I'm used to it.
Yeah. We're going to get to this in chapters 12, 13, and 14. I haven't landed yet, but I'm moving more and more in the direction of landing in a place that the spiritual gifts that God has given us are not necessarily given to us for the entirety of our life. Meaning, it's possible that right now I have a gift of teaching, but I might not a year from now. God may shift that to move me to a place of the gift of evangelism. And so not only does the gifting change, but my role because of that changes as well. So all that to say, I think even if we see this as the gift of marriage or the gift of singleness, it doesn't necessarily have to be, especially for those who are single, this is the gift that God has given me, period, and I have to stay in this. But seasonally, this is the gift that I have, and so therefore, how do I act and live in this gifting that God's given? Does that make sense?
I think one thing is just praying and asking the Lord, like, what do you have for me with this gift in this season? And asking the Lord to clarify or to give light to what it is he's gifting you with and why. And there's some purpose in it. There's some way that he's wanting you to use that for his kingdom, for his glory. And so understanding that it's a calling that he's put on your life. And so just asking him, like, why? What is it that you have for me in this gift that you've given me?
Yeah, I was going to say similar things to that. Like, I mean, because I also think, again, my perspective would probably be different than others. I have kind of complicated emotions around marriage and singleness, but I do want to be married. And I think now, though, has been a really unique time of pressing into, like, what is around me and what am I doing? And, like, God, where could you lead in my life because I am single? And I'm really thankful for that. Like, there could be, I'm not going to say anything with certainty, like, exciting things, like, coming up in life. And not that those things couldn't happen at all if I were married, but I think there are really unique opportunities that God has provided through being single. And that's, I think, what I've been, like, learning to press into more, like, these things that are before me, and pressing into the relationships around me more too. I think that's, like, a challenge too, of, like, who is in my life or the life of other single people, and how can you press into those relationships more, and just seek really sweet gifts in each of those, especially with other women right now too, but with, like, all kinds of people.
That's good. I think I want to hear from you most, because you are in that situation right now. So the things that I would say, or we would say, would be either speculative or maybe not as helpful. But I think a few things come to mind. A lot of things that you said, Betty, I think are really helpful. I have a friend who's a pastor, and he is single, has never been married. And he's talked to me a lot. He's embraced this. He's gotten to a place where he's embraced the fact that he's currently single. And he has told me, he's like, I study and prepare to preach a lot more than you do. And that's a gift that God's given me. And I'm able to use that gift for the building up of our church. And it's been beautiful. He said, now, would I long to be married? Yes. But has God given me some really unique opportunities? And the guy's a brilliant guy and an amazing preacher. And you see it, like, he's got the space to do that. Now, that's not to say that I'm somehow not using the gift I have well, but my calling is different than what his is. So I think there's some of that. I would say this, though, and you can tell me if I'm being insensitive.
You're being insensitive.
I'll go the negative. I almost guarantee that God doesn't want you to use your singleness only longing for not being single. But that longing's there, but not in a complaining, my life is less than kind of way, but in a, yes, I long to be married and I'm not. So what does God have for me in this? And that's probably a constant push, a constant battle of wrestling through where am I landing in that, I would imagine. Tell me later if I was insensitive.
Yeah,
not now. Not right now.
Yeah, when Eric tells us about the establishment that he went to, I'll tell you.
That makes it sound shady.
Yeah. I think it's shady, but no, it's not. That's not.
Well, you went.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't have. So I want to switch gears here a little bit to go back to the big point that Paul is making here about husbands and wives frequently, regularly having physical intimacy together. It's a gift. It guards against sexual immorality. I want to ask this question: what are some common challenges between a husband and a wife that may make it hard to obey and put this passage into practice? Whether it's differences between males and females, whether it's baggage people can bring into that relationship, what are some common challenges here?
Children in the home.
That's one.
Or in the womb.
Or in the womb.
Children in general can bring in some challenges there.
And they're also the beautiful blessing that God gives.
They are. That's true. It can be both and. I think life before marriage and some of the things that can happen before marriage or the choices that are made can bring in baggage. I think, like I mentioned earlier, just whatever culture you grew up in and the narrative that you received about marital relations can affect how you react or you respond in that, and that can bring baggage. Like Vince said, just kids in the home, exhaustion from newborns, toddlers, teenagers that are up till all hours of the night and want to come in and talk to you at 11 o'clock at night. And that's the time that they want to chat. And so it just, kids are very disruptive to some of the natural rhythms in marriage.
Well, I would say added to that, when there are kids in the home, the care of the parents is poured out on those kids. And often what can happen is the relationship for the husband and wife diminishes because the relationship with the kids increases. And there's just a lack of any kind of intimacy between the husband and the wife in those times.
Well, yeah. I remember when, we were homeschooling, and even when the boys were little, like by the time the boys got to bed, which was 7 o'clock at night, I was
not
spent.
Soon enough. Yeah.
I was spent. Like I emotionally, physically exhausted, because I think especially moms with little kids, like you're on all day when you're home with them. And so then to turn around and even have any sort of emotional energy to engage with your husband, not even in intimacy, but just engaging with them can feel really overwhelming. It can feel exhausting. And there's no I just need to get through a few days of this and then I'll have a chance to recharge. Like it's perpetual exhaustion for days and weeks and months on end. And so it can be really hard to figure out how to navigate that as a couple once you've got people in the home that you're pouring into constantly.
So anyway, new parents.
Kids are great.
Yeah, I think that's one. Does anybody else have any other thoughts? Go for it. Betty's got some
Well,
thoughts.
I have a thought and a question. I think one... Well, wait, what was the actual question? Let me make sure I'm answering the question.
What are some challenges to putting this passage into practice?
Okay, I think even some physical reason that you can not be intimate within marriage, whether it's disability or something else. But then that leads to a question of how can this passage apply to a situation like that, where there's maybe a very blatant physical reason that can't happen.
Yeah, there's people that do have chronic illness or their health is deteriorating, or there's people that navigate chronic pain and sickness and things along those lines. And so that can make this really tricky to know what does obedience look like in those situations. And so
yeah, I think it does. However, that's not a but. I'm not disagreeing. The challenges are there. The point of the passage, though, the point Paul is making is, how do you as a couple guard one another from the temptation towards sexual immorality? And so I think if that's the overarching picture, how do we help guard one another? Then I think together in an intimate, maybe in some intimate conversations, you talk through what are the best ways for me to help guard you, for you to help guard me. It's not going to look the same as it used to, or that others have it, but that's the primary concern, is how are we helping guard one another from this?
Yeah, so it has to start with conversation and not just assumptions about where people are at in a relationship.
There's a lot more to intimacy, too, than one that tends to come to mind.
Well, no, but that's it.
So, there's a lot more that you can do, like Vince was saying, to protect one another.
We're trying to help iTunes not shut this podcast down.
Well, and I think
that E off.
I think that's another challenge, is that somebody years ago, I was either right before we got married or early in marriage, gave me some counsel that was really helpful. And she said that, Often a way that a man looks to connect with a wife is through physical, but the way a wife looks to connect is through emotional. Mm-hmm. And what often happens in marriages is that when work gets busy and kids are intense and schedules are insane, the wife is not feeling emotionally cared for. Mm-hmm. And so she's going to withdraw physically because she's not feeling like her emotional needs are being met. And the husband is going to want to press in physically because that's how his needs are being, mm-hmm. his emotional needs are being met. And so she just gave some counsel as far as like, pay very close attention to this, because you're going to realize that emotionally you're going to feel very distant from your husband, and then that can start to create resentment because you're not feeling emotionally cared for, he's not feeling physically cared for, and so there starts to be this kind of divide. And so I thought that was really helpful counsel, and just recognizing like the way that men and women approach intimacy is really different. And so sometimes a woman just needs you to sit down and talk with her and kind of give her an opportunity to pour out her heart and to feel heard and understood. And that's going to feel as intimate as some other act mm-hmm. may. Mm-hmm.
So I had this thought, which you all have already said. This is
Get your pens out. Get your pens out.
But this blows my mind a little bit, especially given some of our upbringings in the 80s and 90s. It seems like what Paul is saying is that to protect your holiness, that for regular physical intimacy between a husband and a wife, like that should happen. Like holiness is the big outcome, where often the message seems like it's the opposite, or it's a concession of sorts. So connecting holiness to this destroys my brain a little bit, and it shouldn't be surprising. And it's what you said, but that's happening to me right now. I just wanted to share it. And you got a splinter from the loft.
From the loft.
It was something I was going to say yesterday, but I was really yesterday was me working hard not to just bring humor in. So as much as it maybe didn't seem like it was actually me. One thought I had was, in God's kindness, He gave us a way to guard ourselves from the temptation to sin in a way that is pleasurable. Mm-hmm. Mm. Often we think about, how do I guard myself from sin? It's going to be horrible. Mm-hmm. It's going to be something I don't want. It's going to be something that's going to be a pain in the rear. Yeah, right? Like I'm going to put a rubber band around my wrist, and every time I have that thought, I'm going to snap my wrist. But God's given us something.
In my high school did that.
Yeah, that's right. I know. But God's given us a way to guard from sin, or to push toward holiness in a way that is enjoyable, which is really different than most of the ways we think about who God is and what He's called us to.
It's also not the message that the church often teaches.
No.
And it's not the message that the Christian subculture teaches either. I mean, it's just not something that we talk about. And so it's often avoided.
Yeah.
There's way more we could explore, but we're not going to, because we are out of time. However, with that said, there are a lot of what-if situations, and a lot of these are really tricky with lots of nuances. So just like Vince encouraged you, our listener, yesterday, have conversations with either a trusted friend, like somebody you trust, who loves you, about these things, or if you're married, with your spouse, because they're important, and we don't talk about them often, and we're certainly not hitting everything on this podcast.
Yeah, and I had some questions yesterday about, hey, what are we supposed to do how are we supposed to have these discussions as townships this week? I don't know. But enjoy that. No,
I mean, split up as guys and gals.
Yeah.
Like actually divide, and then be able to talk a little more openly with one another about some of these things.
Yeah, that's good.
I want to ask our last question. What do you see of God's glory here? According to this passage, what is God like?
That's my answer. I answered it already, that God has given us a way to guard ourselves that is actually an enjoyable part of being with our spouse.
I think too that God can take something that it's multifaceted, and that it is intended for procreation. So there is a function to it, and yet He also brings enjoyment and beauty from a function. So it's just, He's a God that loves to bring beauty from things.
I think just that there are really unique pieces of these gifts that God gives, no matter which season you're in, whether you're married or whether you're single. I'm also speaking into this coming out of coming from a point right now where I'm like, being single is great. So maybe it's easier to see the gifts right now of these things. But yeah, I just think that no matter the season, it is a gift, and God has really good intentions with those things.
I think I see his care for both men and women in this. I appreciate that Paul even explicitly mentions both sides of caring for both men and women in marriage and in the delight that can come from marriage. It's not one-sided. I appreciate that.
Yep, I have nothing unique. God gives us things to enjoy as his children, an expression of his love and care for us. It's amazing. That's the sort of God we have. All right, next week, it's been modified a little bit. Vince, what's the passage for next week?
Yeah, we're all the way through verse 24, so 10 through 24.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.